Eccomi. Ciao a tutti. Hello, everybody. Very happy to be here today with you for what is the third segment of the Vinitaly encounters with the producers of MicroMegaWines. MicroMegaWines, or MMW, is the new pavilion at Vinitaly, which was created last year. In fact, this year, in 2023, we have only the second edition of MicroMegaWines, which is the part of Vinitaly that is devoted to very high quality but small volume wineries, hence the micro, small volume productions, small batch wines, if you will, and mega or high quality. So small volumes, high quality, less really can be more. Many estates don't have the ability to advertise, to participate in world tours, and other activities. So it's harder for them to have the quality of their products recognized and have people know who they are and about them. So at Vinitaly, a couple of years ago, I thought with my colleagues that this would be a wonderful opportunity to help people who may not necessarily be that small, but have small volume productions among their larger volume wines that tell a particular story, either that of a grape variety, either that of a territory, of a production method. And so a very unique section of Vinitaly. And we have 40 estates this year. Today we're going to talk with 4 of them. One of them is very interesting, and it's the first one we're going to deal with today, and it's Tasi. Everybody knows the Valpolicella, everybody knows the wines such as Amarone, but in fact there are many, many producers of these wines. Tasi is one of them, not as famous as some others, but one of the better producers. And I think it's wonderful to give people such as the ones that are making Tasi a world-class winery the visibility that otherwise they might have trouble finding. Raccontaci un po' di Tasi e poi ti faccio qualche domanda.
Okay. Hi, Ian. Hi, everybody. My name is Mattia from Tasi. We are located in Val di Lasi, which is basically the eastern border of the Valpolicella appellation. And the heart of our project, it's an old quarry located at about 500 meters of elevation. It was a limestone quarry that was abandoned in the late 70s and that we have converted in the last 20 years into vineyards and a regenerative organic farm all around it. I guess what makes our micro production, small production, very unique, it's the combination of this soil, which is very much pure limestone, with the elevation, and also we have close by the Lessinia Natural Park with Monte Carrega, which is over 2,000 meters of elevation, cold wind coming down every night. And so that combination, that terroir, in essence, allows us to really push the boundaries of organic and biodynamic farming into something that we believe it's becoming very interesting and very sustainable. Our strong focus is therefore in the work that we do in the vineyards, and what we do in the winery is actually just do as little as possible to preserve the characteristics that our grapes give us. In fact, one of our most unique wines, I think, it's our Valpolicella Superiore, for example, which even though it's normally harvested in the second half of October and has a fruit that is at full ripeness, acidity, and we accompany that and we preserve that through aging in cement vats for over 2 years in order to focus on that drinkability.
So the important thing about Tasi is that for people who are listening, Tasi is in the Val di Lasi. It's the area that was made famous by Del Forno, for example. So It's not part of the Valpolicella Classica. It is the extended Valpolicella out to the east, but in fact, it's a very high quality area that, because the terroir there is different from the Classica, the wines are also going to be different. We tend to think of Valpolicella and Amarone as always the same wine, but I think that is very reductive. There are, like everywhere else when it comes to wine, there are different terroirs and different producers. So I think that it's true that there is one Valpolicella and one Amarone and one Recioto della Valpolicella, the sweet red wine of the Valpolicella. But in fact, there are the Valpolicellas and the Amarones of the area that is Classica, of the area of the Valpantana, and the area of the Val di Lasi. They're all different. It's not that one is better than the other, but they are different. And I always think that Italian wines have sold themselves short over the years, because you who are listening out there, and the reason we're doing this in English is because a lot of sommeliers from North America and Great Britain and English-speaking people all over the world are listening. You all know about the differences between the wines of Saint-Julien and Margaux and Pauillac. Yeah, they're all Bordeaux, but you have no problem saying this is a Saint-Julien and this is a Pauillac. Or when it comes to Sauternes, you talk about Sauternes and Barsac. Or when you talk about Burgundy, you know, this is a Corton, this is a Volnay, this is a Chambol-Musigny, this is a Gevrey-Chambertin. And I think in Italy, we haven't done a very good job of that. We've always talked about this is Valpolicella, this is Amarone. It's true, they are. But the Valpolicella, the Amarone, the Recioto of the Val di Lasi is bound to be different from that of the other areas. And again, it's not that one is better or one is worse. It's different. Del Forno, like I say, is in the Val di Lasi, and we all know that he's one of the most coveted and most sought after producers of Italian wine all over the world. In the Val di Lasi, you have a different climate, you have a different soil, you have a different reality, and therefore the wines are going to be different. The wines made by Tasi usually have quite a bit of Corvina, se non sbaglio, dimmi tu, about 47-50% Corvina, 28-30% Corvinone, about 20% Rondinella, and a touch of Oseleta.
Exactly.
Is your blend an important part of your wine, or do you think you could change it and add more of one grape and the wine would still be the same, or it would change?
I think that in our experience, the soil, the combination of soil of limestone close to the forest is what makes it very unique. But I think in over 10 years, we have seen that in some vintages, the harvest of Corvina was more solid. In some other, Corvinone was coming into play a bit more, and Rondinella as well. And we always have found a different but solid balance between the different vintages.
Well, somebody once told me that Corvinone comes better in the Val di Lasi than anywhere else in the denomination. Do you think that's true, or still Corvina is number one?
Well, I farmed Corvinone only in Val di Lasi, so my experience is limited to that. I think it's very interesting, Corvinone, but it's very tricky as well because the bunch is big. So it ripes in a very uneven way. So in some vintages is really a core part of your production, and you can set aside a lot of Corvinone for Amarone as well. In some other, like the cold vintages, you can use more Corvinone for fresh wines like Valpolicella, where it's rather difficult to use it in Appassimento and Amarone.
So for the people who are listening us, of course, you know that the Valpolicella wines are blends of different grapes. Each grape brings something to the final wine. Corvina is a very good grape variety to dehydrate. It takes very well to dehydration. There have, in fact, been some really interesting genetic studies that have shown that Corvina is really one of the best grapes by which to dehydrate, because in the dehydration process, it turns on genes that allow the formation of molecules that are going to make a better wine. Vice versa, Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot are not ideal for dehydration because genes get turned on that lead to the production of bitter molecules. Corvinone gives a bit more body because if Corvina has one defect, It's that it doesn't have much in the way of tannin. And so Corvinone gives it a little bit more body. One last thing that I like about Tasi is they're unique because they also make a sparkling wine from Garganega, right?
We do actually. Garganega is a very important part of our valley, being on the border with the Soave appellation. And we have all the pergola vineyards that we harvest in several different moments throughout the harvest season. And the first one is the early harvest of the beginning of September. Garganega expresses a beautiful acidity that makes it, in our view, a perfect base for spumante. And we just released actually in 2022 our first Metodo Classico, which is just 12 months, Pradase. And again, it's a really fun and straightforward expression of Garganega.
So 12 months on the lees?
Yes.
Okay, great. Do you plan to make one longer or not yet?
Yes, definitely. Also on the north side of our hillside vineyards, we have a small vineyard of Pinot Noir, which we are growing to make an even more interesting base for spumante. So in the following years, definitely. But actually, we wanted to start with something like that. That was, again, like a pure expression of the grape and the terroir, which is kind of like our style.
So that's great. You see, so that's really the essence of MicroMegaWines. In other words, wines that talk about a specific terroir, and also wines that sing a different tune, because there really aren't that many Metodo Classic or traditional method sparkling wines made with Garganega. There are a few, but if you want to try an altogether different drinking experience, then by all means, coming to MicroMegaWines will give you a chance to try Valpolicella's and Amarones. And we talked about mainly Amarone and Soave and the Garganega this time around. But in fact, at Tasi, in many respects, the wine I like best is really their Valpolicella wine. So I invite you guys all to come to the MicroMega Pavilion. We'll also do master classes every day, so you get a chance to meet the producers. And I look forward to meeting you. I'll be there this year, and I look forward to seeing you all. Grazie davvero, so che sei occupato. Grazie davvero, e poi ci vediamo.
Thank you so much, everybody.
No, un piacere. We're going to see each other pretty soon at Vinitaly.
Yes,
Grazie.
see you at Vinitaly.
Complimenti.
Thank you. Bye.
Ciao, ciao. And then usually it's ladies first, but because of prior commitment, we changed the order of interviews. And now we're going to move on to Elisabetta Chicchellero, who's the owner of Najma Prosecco. Najma Prosecco, like Tasi, was at the first edition of MicroMegaWines. Very interesting producer of classic Prosecco wines, but also of a very interesting sparkling wine that we featured in last year's masterclass, made with Refosco di Peduncolo Rosso. Elisabetta, tell us a little bit about your estate.
Very briefly, if I may share the screen with you, I would like to show you very briefly a few pictures of the estate, just to show you where we are located. Now, this is the boat which gives the name to my wines, which is Najma or Najma. In Arabic means star. And it's a long and story of love and passion that you may read sometimes when you have more time, really. That this is where the estate is located. You have it here, just to show you. Here it's the Veneto region, more or less. And we are at the foot of the Carnicarps, not far from Conegliano. Actually, it's 20 kilometers away from Conegliano and not far from Venice, which is the city where I live. So now we just a few pictures very briefly, but the estate has always been in my mother's family. And I started to manage it in the year 2000, and I started to plant the new vineyard. And now here I'm with my son, my younger son, who is helping me with the both in the vineyard and in the winemaking process. So I planted the new vineyard, which is now covering 20 hectares. I have different varieties in the vineyard, and I have 7 hectares of glera with which I make my Prosecco from the others. And now the whole idea is really that we from the very beginning, I decided I wanted to pay my respects and to respect the environment, which has been given me by my ancestors. So I see that it's very important for me to pass it on to my children and their children. So I started from the very beginning to focus on the vineyard, on the practices in the vineyard and procedures which could help me in preserving the environment, in arriving also at making wines which could be, made in the vineyard, not in the winery. I think of what Ian said before is very, very important, because the terroir is what makes the wine, what makes the differences. And in fact, especially for Prosecco, because usually I'm in the DOC area of Prosecco, and usually people tell me, but you are DOC, you are not DOCG. But well, it is different, and that's what is the best part of it. We like differences. Wines have to be different, and the only thing is that you have to be very good and work very hard to follow the vineyard, to follow the vine. So this year we entered into a new project, which is also sponsored by the Consorzio Prosecco DOC and by the World Biodiversity Association. So we already have a certification which is called SQNPI, which is the National Certification for Sustainability, but we wanted to do more. And so we have, in the framework of this project, we're going to adopt more advanced integrated production strategies, and also other strategies to promote biodiversity in the vineyard and in the whole estate and in the whole part. So what we do, we work on our Prosecco by focusing on the clones that we have in the vineyard. In the vineyard, we have 4 different clones, and we have 3 different kinds of labels of Prosecco, and we choose the clones according to what we want to have in the bottle, whether it is an extra dry or a brut or a millesimato. And we have 2 clones each for the brut and the extra dry, and I will show you here. You can see the 2 labels, and then we have because 2 clones, because the brut has to be to support, to be more almondy, more and to support the fact that it has less sugar, and whereas the extra dry is the more traditional type. Then we have the millesimato, which is, now you see the 2018, but we have the 2021 now. And this is a kind of Charmat, a long Charmat. It remains on the lees for 4 months. And it has also the 4 clones that we have in the vineyard. So at harvesting, we select the grapes according to what we want in the bottle. Last year, I didn't present the millesimato, as Ian was saying, but I presented the spumante rosé. I didn't present the millesimato because it was too young. And like all the other Proseccos, the longer this one remains in the bottle, the better. And so I will present it this year in the master classes, hoping that you will like it. And then we have the Refosco, the rosé. This is a sparkling wine. It's not the Prosecco, because it's 100% Refosco dal Peduncolo Rosso with a Charmat method. And this is what I presented last year.
Yeah, so I think that it's a super interesting story. A story of love and passion, right? Because yes. Naima or Najma is the name of a beautiful Algerian girl that an Italian American fell in love with. It's a beautiful story. You can read it on the estate website. I think what's interesting about the Naima estate is that, Prosecco is a really popular name and a popular wine. And there are many, many Proseccos the world over. However, the problem for Prosecco is that it's a victim of its own success. And while there are some amazingly great Prosecco wines, and if you've never had one, you can't realize just how good Prosecco can be and just how complex it is and how terroir specific it is, because in the DOC area, there are many, many different realities. There are the sands of Venice, there are the rocks of the Grave in Friuli, there are the clays towards Treviso. So they're really very, very different areas from where the Glera can give you very, very different wines. Also, some producers do, as Elisabetta was telling us, a selection, a research on clones or even old biotypes and grape varieties. So it's one thing if you have some specific Glera clones, but if you use other Glera clones, you can make a different Prosecco. In fact, some people have old varieties in their vineyards in small amounts, and therefore that will change too. For example, a grape called Verdiso gives you a lot of acidity, and those Proseccos will tend to be a little bit more acid and a little bit fruity and a little less ripe than the ones that are all Glera. It's not that one is better than the other, but they are different. And the reason why I always point these things out is because I want people to understand the value of Prosecco wines. Prosecco wine is not just a cheap sparkler, which is what it is used for or thought of as. And yes, we love champagne, and yes, we love Franciacorta, but the fact is these are completely different wines. The Charmat Martinotti method, the autoclave method by which you make Prosecco, is actually the perfect way by which to make a great Prosecco wine. There are certainly many producers who make excellent metodo classico, traditional method, classic champagne method, re-fermentation in the bottle Prosecco wines, but they're a completely different animal from the Prosecco made in the Charmat Martinotti method. And again, it's not that one is better than the other. The Glera grape on top of it all does extremely well with the Charmat Martinotti method. So it's just a fantastic and lovely wine. And so there are many, many possibilities to the Prosecco wine. And the worst thing that can happen to it is that people out there don't realize how complex and how interesting, how fascinating the world of Prosecco wines can be. So I think that, for example, when you come to the MicroMegaWines Pavilion, I really urge you to try the Brut and the Extra Dry from Elisabetta, because they really are two different Proseccos. They're different because of the residual sugar. So the Extra Dry has about 14 grams per liter of sugar, but it's really not that much because of the acidity of the wine, but it's clearly a little sweeter than the Brut. But in fact, it's not just a matter of sweetness. When you taste the two wines, you realize, with paying a little attention, that there is a different organoleptic profile. They almost don't seem like they're made with the same grape. And it's not because of the sugar, although granted, there is a sugar difference, but there is really an aroma, flavor, texture difference that is very, very obvious. I really think it's great that this year we'll try the Millesimato in the masterclass, because vintage Prosecco wines are really great. And I think we need to broadcast that Prosecco is an important wine. Last year, I asked Elisabetta to bring the spumante made with the Refosco Peduncolo Rosso, because nobody makes that, you know, and I think it's good to show people something that they've never had before. And, you know, at Vinitaly, everybody's busy, everybody's running around. They say, oh, yet another Prosecco producer, I don't have time. But you tell them, hey, this producer makes good Prosecco wines, but also makes a very interesting Refosco Peduncolo Rosso sparkler that nobody does, basically. And that maybe grabs their attention. And it's just a lovely wine. It's easygoing, it's fresh, it's, I don't want to say simple, but it's just approachable and enjoyable and perfect, I think, for summer parties, barbecues, and poolside sipping. It's really a wonderful wine that has sneaky concentration and complexity. So I like your wines, Elisabetta.
Thank you, thank you, Ian. Very well said. This is always what I'm trying to do, to explain people. Just try the wine. You don't have to say just it's a Prosecco. It's not a Prosecco. It's a wine, first of all, and then it's also a Prosecco. Thank you.
No, and that needs to be said. You know, a lot of people aren't happy when I say these things, but the fact is, there's just too much bad Prosecco that gives Prosecco a bad name. And that is on us, you know, that is on our country not to let that happen. So it's something that we have to work on, because it's a shame. Prosecco is really a world-class wine. And I remember, and I'll end it here, and then we'll move on to the next interview. But I will never forget when I hosted a masterclass on Prosecco wines for a bunch of fairly well-known North American sommeliers, and the sommelier owner of 3 restaurants in California had never realized or understood that there was a difference between the Proseccos of Conegliano and the Proseccos of Valdo, which are 2 towns in the DOCG area. To make it brief, Conegliano has generally more clay soils, and Valdo has more limestone. Now, those are just generalizations. But the point is, I can't begin to describe you the look on this person's face when I gave them a wine of a Prosecco of clay soils and a Prosecco of limestone soils. I cannot begin to tell you how the eyes opened, how the jaw dropped. The person, a well-known sommelier in California, and I'll stop there, realized for the first time, and I'm talking about 5 years ago, not 30, 5 years ago, realized for the first time that there was terroir to Prosecco. And there is terroir, not just in the DOCG area, but in the DOC and the Treviso, Colli area, because like I said, Venice has sand, Friuli has rocks, and so it's really a world to Prosecco. Never make the mistake of thinking that it's a cheap sparkler, because that's not the way it is. And if you come to the MicroMega Pavilion, I'll be glad to show you around. Grazie, Elisabetta.
Thank you very much.
All right, so now we're going to go back to the boys, and we're going to talk to Tamburino Sardo. Speaking of Soave, we're going to speak.
Not Soave, because Tamburino Sardo is located in Custoza. Hi, Jan.
No, but speaking of the white grapes of Veneto, in other words, Garganega, Trebbiano di Lugana, Trebbiano di Soave. Again, a lot of people just aren't aware of the many grape varieties and the many terroirs of Lombardy, of Veneto, of Friuli. And unless we explain it to them, they just don't understand. It's not just a name. There is a reality behind the wines and the production. So tell us a little bit about Tamburino Sardo, and also the name of your winery. That's very interesting.
Yes. Hi, Jan. Hi to everybody. I'm Emanuele from Tamburino Cellar. Tamburino is from Custoza Hill. The name is from Hill of Tamburino. Is a historic name from war was happened in 1848, 1846 from the independence of Italy from Austria. So we keep this name to remember the history and also the location of the mother born in the cellar. So that when Adriano in 1968 opened the cellar, decided to give this name. We are in the southeast of Garda Lake in the Morenic Hill, just in the highest point of the Morenic in Custoza. In front of us, we have the Po Valley. In our back, we have the Pre-Alps of with a lot of windy. So our location is really one microclimatic zone. From windy from the mountain and the Garda Lake, and the windy from the Po Valley, just to get the windy just from the sea, Adriatic Sea. So our terroir is rock, stone. So it's really one beautiful place, and really how to say, can you help me? Maybe Jan is.
Sure.
Yes.
So I think the first thing to realize is that Custoza is one of
Yes, we produce the local wine, just Custoza. Our grape is the Garganega, you already tell, Cortese, White Fernanda, Bianca Fernanda, Trebbiano, Trebbianello. We also inside our vineyard, we have Incrocio Manzoni, Sauvignon, some other kind. So we do from basic Custoza to Custoza Superiore. So for us, it's like one crew. We have a lot of satisfaction with the Custoza, because who can try really feel the real Custoza, real terroir, with a great acidity, one good minerality, with a riper fruit. For example, we have the basic is much more flour, and our Krug Laguglia is a much more fruit, riper fruit.
Exactly.
This is our main producer. Also, we can produce Bardolino because the zone we have also Corvina and Rondinella to produce the Bardolino Chiaretto. And also we have one part in Valpolicella, but this is another story. Now we are talking about the main producer is Custoza.
So the main thing that people need to understand is that Custoza is one of
it's one blend of wine.
Yeah, it's a very important wine area. Lake Garda makes some of Italy's most interesting wines. First of all, it's one of the best areas in Italy for rosé wines. In Italy, essentially, the three areas where the best rosés are made are really around Lake Garda, in Puglia, and in Abruzzo. So really, it's a great area. One of the reasons why the rosés come well is the combination of the soils and the grape varieties used. So when it comes to the red wines, they use the same grapes in Valpolicella, such as Corvina, such as Molinara, such as Rondinella. But in the Custoza area, in around Lake Garda, the soils are different, the climate is different, and so the expression of the grapes is going to be different. Bardolino,
totally different.
Yeah. So, for example, if you had to tell people, what's the difference, according to you, between a Bardolino and a Valpolicella, would you say?
But there is the way to make the wine is totally different. Our cellar all is made the harvest by hand. But the difference from Bardolino to Valpolicella is when you make the wine. Bardolino is just to pick up, press, and do the wine. From Valpolicella, you need to make the harvest, left the grape there to dry 50-55 days, and after to start to press and make the wine. Maybe from a classic, we never use, for Valpolicella classic, we never use the wood, like Bardolino. The classic is made by iron, steel iron. You know, we stop there. So the difference when you test is a little bit out to deciso. Jan is a spigoloso.
Yeah. So the one thing that also people need to realize is that in this area, the soils tend to be a little bit lighter. The wines tend to have more fragrance and perfume. You can make very big wines too. I mean, you can make Amarone as well. If you want, you can air dry the grapes. You can do all sorts of things. But the classic Bardolino is really one of Italy's best light to medium bodied red wines. One of the reasons is also that in this area, there's still a bit of Molinara, which is a wonderful grape that adds spice and salt, but that many people don't like to use because they feel it has a dilutional effect. But in fact, it helps, besides the soil and besides the climate, it helps differentiate the wines of this area from those of the Valpolicella, which really isn't that far away. How much Molinara there is in your Bardolino?
Just 5-10%.
But that makes a big difference. Believe it or not, if you have 5 or 10% Molinara, which is a big berry with lots of juice, it looks pink, and that's why a lot of people don't want to use it when they make Amarone, because they fear it's dilutional. But in fact, it gives you also a very spicy note and a very saline note. Molinara adds, in Italian we say dà il sale. It gives a saline note, which is highly typical. So you see, again, like we were talking earlier about the differences there are in Proseccos, and again, it's not that one is better or one is worse, it's that they're different. It's the same thing with the wines of Bardolino. They often have a salinity, they often have a freshness that you don't have in other wines. And, you know, frankly, there's a real place for those sort of wines. Having said that, I think the really interesting wines of Tamburino Sardo are the whites, the Custoza Superiore Laguglia, which is their cru.
Yes.
That's a very interesting blend of some of Italy's most interesting grape varieties, such as Incrocio Manzone,
Yes,
Trebbianello, which I don't think anybody knows much about really. Bianca Fernanda is what in Piedmont they call Cortese. They call Cortese. So it's just a very fresh white wine. It can be a little bit richer and thicker when it's grown at lower yields and later harvested. And we drank Laguglia last year at the masterclass, I remember. And so two different expressions of the Custoza terroir. How many bottles do you make of Custoza and Custoza Laguglia?
Oh, Custoza basic, we do around 16,000 bottles.
Yeah. Mm.
About the Laguglia, we do only 6,000 bottles.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
Just is the one crook because we use the highest point and the oldest grape, the oldest vineyard, and also, you know, we collect really less quantity. Also, the different proceed from each other is for Laguglia, when is the time to make the harvest, we can cut the lymph tube and we left the grape there to dry almost 20, 15, 25 days, depending year by year, the condition of the weather, if it's okay or not. Otherwise, we collect and we go ahead with the dry in the cellar. So this is the biggest difference. All our wines make without oxygen, temperature control, with the dry ice. So this is our mission is to looking for of the quality of the wine, not of the quantity. So we must be, when the people drink our wine, to leave the mind of the terroir where they are, where we are. This is our mission. Also, we are waiting the new Vinitaly to introduce a new wine we already made last year. Is a new Custoza, fast dosé, but we can show in the Vinitaly. And
wonderful.
In Vinitaly.
We look forward to trying it. And like I say, for people who haven't had a chance to taste the wines of Custoza, or who haven't really tasted, I say, benchmark Bardolino wines, I really recommend you come over to the pavilion, because it gives you a chance to focus and to try wines that you might not be as acquainted with. But Custoza and Bardolino, other wines too, of course, are really part of what Italy does so well, and it's part of a difference, a diversity in what the country can express, and different wines for different palates, for different pocketbooks. It really is, and I love the wines of Tamburino Sardo. I think you'll like them too, and I look forward to seeing you there. Bravi davvero, grazie.
Thank you.
Grazie. Ok, poi vedo che abbiamo con noi Tenuta Pradase e poi chiuderemo con Colle Manora. So we're going to talk about a very interesting project. Tenuta Pradase is sort of the jewel of one of Italy's really best known wineries called Valdo. Valdo is a huge Prosecco producer known all over the world. And, you know, there's always a tendency to think that artisanal products are always the best. But in fact, I think there's a lot to say, a lot of skill in making huge volumes of a very, very high quality product. People always talk about Dom Perignon and how fantastic a champagne is, but they make like anywhere from 2 to 3 million bottles a year, and they probably make a lot more. Nobody knows exactly how many million bottles a year of Dom Perignon are made. So you can make great wine even in large numbers. However, at Valdo, they created this jewel of a property called Tenuta Pradase, and we want to know more about it. So tell us all about it.
Okay, so thank you, Ian, for inviting us. I'm Matteo D'Agostino. I'm speaking on behalf of our chairman, Pierluigi Bolla, also because this project is really linked to the Bolla family. So we're talking about a family from Soave, from Verona, really famous, really popular for wine production since last century. And the family Bolla and the story of Valdo starts the beginning of the 19th century. So in Valdo Biadene, when Sergio Bolla, so the father of our current chairman, Pierluigi Bolla, met and discussed an agreement with this really small winery called Savis, that was an acronym for Spumanti e Vini Superiori. And sorry, but I have some issue with line, so I beg your pardon here in case.
Oh, we can hear you well. We can hear you well.
Ah, okay, perfect.
No problem, really.
And the story so started in the 19th century with family Bolla and the beginning of Valdo. And then by end of the 30s, they acquired the winery Valdo in Valdo Biadene. And the story of the family Bolla starts with the story of the winery. Coming to the nowadays, so the project you have mentioned, that is Tenuta Pradase, is a project that is really important for the family Bolla, because they acquired 10 years ago a property in Valdo Biadene. They acquired this little estate, so this little vineyard. We are talking about 1.2 hectares actually, and they decided to recover ancient clones of Glera, so Glera basically Glera Tonda and Glera Lunga, and then also to add some autochthon grapes, always from the Valdo Biadene area. In this case, we're talking about Verdiso, Bianchetta, and Pereira. The vineyard, we call it internally, so we call it the Prosecco Library, because we have done a huge work of research and a huge study of research with different clones. So each line of the vineyard has a different clone of Glera, Verdiso, and Bianchetta. And this helped us to study the best cuvée for a specific Valdo Biadene DOCG sparkling wine to be done with traditional method. So we're talking about metodo classico. The story of Valdo Biadene DOCG traditional method or metodo classico in Valdo started at the end of the 1990s. So we're talking about more than 20 years ago. It was a sort of challenge in order to challenge our winemaker and also our concept of what is Valdo Biadene Prosecco Superiore. So everybody knows that this sparkling wine is made with Martinotti Charmat method. So we are talking about re-fermentation in tank still. What we wanted to prove ourselves also was to be able to create also a provocation, let me say, in order to communicate that Glera and to prove that Glera can also can also tell a different story. A story that is not only the story of the, let me say, current vintage, but Glera is able to age and to really surprise with different aromas and different notes, especially in the nose, but also in the mouth. Tenuta Pradase, so is a vineyard, single estate, where we produced 6,000 bottles of peculiar 24 months Surly sparkling wine, made with 85% of Glera and the remaining 15% is a blend of Verdiso, Bianchetta, and Pereira. If it's possible also to share a couple of pictures in order to give you an idea of the Tenuta Pradase project. So this is our winemaker, Gianfranco Zanoni. Behind him, you can see we are renewing the Tenuta Pradase building, and it will be ready in the next month, basically. And here we able also to host our wine lovers and so guests from all over the world. This is the vineyard with the Tenuta Pradase in construction, and then this is basically the bottle of our sparkling wine. So Ian, let me say, we can say that Tenuta Pradase is a sort of a spin-off for Valdo, so it's really a different winery, let me say, because we are talking about a small production of traditional method. So, as I said, talking about only 6,000 bottles per year. Yeah, and that's it for us. It's really important to, as you mentioned before, to be not to be victim of ourselves when we are talking about Prosecco. In this case, Prosecco is not mentioned on the bottle, so we talk about Valdobbiadene DOCG because we believe that the specific characteristics of the terroir of Valdobbiadene, and in our case of the Vigneto Pradase, that is a vigneto registered in the region, Veneto region registry for the vineyard, can tell a different story and about Prosecco, and can promote also another vision what is the Prosecco Superiore.
Yep.
I don't know if you agree with me.
No, definitely, I totally agree. I think that as I was saying earlier, when we were speaking with Elisabetta of Najma Prosecco, the first thing that we really need people internationally to realize, wine lovers everywhere and wine professionals to realize that the world of Prosecco is a very vast and complex one. There can be some very interesting, very good, delicious, very inexpensive Prosecco wines that are delicious in the summer, and there's fewer things that are more mouth-watering and enjoyable. There are already much more complex Prosecco wines that will speak of specific terroirs, and that is true both in the DOC and the DOCG. And in fact, we need to give Prosecco the dignity that we give to other wines and realize that it is not just a cheap bubbly, but it is in fact a world-class wine that speaks of terroir. And you get to the top levels of production that speak very clearly of specific vineyards and specific sites within specific territories. So just like we talk about the Barolos of Serralunga and the Barolos of La Morra, there are the Proseccos of Conegliano, Valdobbiadene, and many, many other towns, and each is going to tell a different tale. Last but not least, there is the possibility with Glera to make traditional sparkling wines by the champagne method, which are really different from the Proseccos that we are accustomed normally to drink. And in fact, these Metodo Classico Proseccos really are or have much more in common with a great Franciacorta and a great champagne than they do with a great Prosecco wine made with the Charmat Martinotti method. And again, it is not that one is better than the other, but they are different. And that is very, very important. When you drink some of these wines, like the sparkling wine of Tenuta Pradase, it really is a wine that can stand up to any champagne you can think of. And again, it's not that one is better. It's not that champagne is better than Prosecco. It's different. And each wants a different place at the dinner table and during the course of your day. Last but not least, what I think is fantastic about Tenuta Pradase is you always have to admire and you always have to appreciate and you always have to compliment when a really big winery, a really successful winery goes out and does something like they've done at Valdo. This is to their credit. Valdo does not need to create Tenuta Pradase. They could be very happy doing what they do, and they do it very well. But through passion and love and willingness to research, they're doing something totally different. We're talking 6,000 bottles a year, I mean, really. But with their library vineyard, their biblioteca of old local varieties, they can come up with a product that is not different just because of the fact it's made with the traditional method of secondary fermentation in the bottle, but it is different because it is made with some very old local varieties that really have been cast aside for a variety of reasons. And remember always that grape varieties are not cast aside usually because they are bad. That can always happen. But in fact, through the centuries, grape varieties have been cast aside because human values change. What we value today as being important is not what our ancestors used to value 200 years ago. When people were poor and were starving, they wanted grapes that produced a lot. They wanted grape varieties that didn't fall sick every 3 minutes. In fact, I'll tell you right off the bat, and I know a lot of Prosecco producers cringe when I say this, one of the greatest grape varieties that Italy has, is Pereira. Pereira is just a fantastic grape that was always part of the Prosecco blend. The problem is that it's sickly. It takes the oidium like ducks to water. And, you know, clearly a wine producer, I mean, we love wine and we're all geeks, but they have to survive, right? So if you got a grape that, if you look at it, you know, maybe angrily, the thing stops producing wine. If it sees a cloud in the distance, it gets offended, it stops producing wine. It stops producing grape. So it's very hard. Also, Pereira.
You are completely right. Tell me, also because last vintage for Pereira was a disaster, let me say. So if we had all our Tenuta Pradase planted with Pereira, it should have become a disaster, basically, because the low in water and also the temperature of last year was, and also the disease, the oidium, was really a mess for Pereira, and we saved a couple of lines of this very great grape variety. But I agree with you, and let me add also that I completely agree with you when you're talking about this to be terroir specific. I mean, to produce a traditional method with Chardonnay or Pinot Noir in Valdo Biadene, from our point of view, it doesn't make any sense, because it's not. So we know that in the past, a lot of wineries tried to make apart Prosecco also other sparkling wine with the traditional method and Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. But we thought that if we want to be to tell a story about terroir, but different from Charmat Martinotti, we need to stick to the Glera grape matrix and to the Bianchetta and Verdisa and Pereira. So we're talking about grape varieties from Valdo Biadene. Respect them and bring them to a next level with this different process. And so that's something that we are completely in line. And it's something that we have done for the passion of the family Bolla, because for us, from a, let me say, business point of view, this is not business, this is passion for Valdo Biadene, for the grapes, for the wine, basically, because our family likes to experiment and to make always something more. And so that's the reason why. So thanks, Ian, for this great opportunity.
No, it's great. And I'll just finish by saying, and then we'll move on to our last interview, which is Colle Manora. And that is that the Bolla family of Valdo has been around since 1883. When Aldo Bolla founded the estate, he actually had a little trattoria, locanda, and it's actually still there in Soave.
Yeah.
And so they've been around for a while, so obviously successful people. But never forget that Prosecco historically was a blend of the Glera varieties of Bianchetta, which gave a little body, Bianchetta Trevigiana, to be perfectly honest, because there's lots of Bianchettas. Bianchetta Trevigiana, which gave body, Verdiso, which gave acidity, Pereira, which, like the name says, pear, actually has a remarkable pear. And if you're like me, I love to go tasting from vats when I go visit the estates. When you put your nose into a vat of Pereira, it's almost like a pear nectar. It's really, you never forget it once you smell it. It's really unique. But each grape adds a little something to the final blend. Then, honestly, Glera is such a great grape that maybe you can do without those grapes. So there's nothing wrong with a pure Glera Prosecco. Actually, it's perfectly fine. It's a great grape. But it's really great to have saved these old vines, because once they're gone, they're gone. We're not getting them back. And so I think, congratulations. And besides, the wine is going to be very, very different, because the Tenuta Pradase sparkler is about 85% Glera and 15%, then it depends on the vintage, of the other three varieties. So you get a chance to taste a totally different Prosecco wine. So make sure you come to Micromega and we'll get to taste it together. I really look forward to seeing you. Can't wait. Say hi to Pierluigi. And I really look forward to, because I love these wines. And I'm going to try to come see you guys if I can before I go back to China. And if not, I'm back in the summer and I'll do my best to see you all. Grazie.
Grazie a te.
Grazie, complimenti. Bravi, allora Colle Manora, che conosco da una vita. Ciao Marina Orlandi, Contucci, Ponno.
Come stai?
Bene, bene, bene. So this young lady has one of the longer names in Italian wine. Marina, if you ever married a Spanish guy, you wouldn't be able to have a business card because you'd have so many last names. Anyways, so Marina Orlandi Contucci Ponno and Giorgio Schoen run Colle Manora. Colle Manora was actually, it's an estate in Piedmont. It was founded back in 1981, but they took over in 2001. And these are two of the more interesting people in Italian wine. And I will let you we'll let Marina tell us a little bit about the estate, and then maybe I'll ask her a few questions. Vai, Marina.
Yes, thank you, Ian, to give us the opportunity. And we missed you last year because you were stuck in Hong Kong, I remember.
Don't remind me.
Yeah. So we were really unhappy not to see you around in Italy. So I thank you also for the opportunity this year to be there again. And it has been a very interesting experience because, in fact, it's interesting to see those estates who make a sort of choice in a certain way. We are small estate because Colle Manora is in the total is about now 100 hectares, but the vineyards are 20, sorry. And Colle Manora has a long story because, in fact, it has been an estate that is born, as you said, in 81. And as many estates in Italy in that period, the previous owner planted also international grapes, because in Italy, the story of the bottle is something which is not so old. I mean, it has, I would say that the explosion of the bottle and the estate bottle is something that we have lived around the beginning of the years 90. Until then, the real wine estate were very few. And also the attention to the single local grapes also, apart from the very well-known as Barolo, Brunello, which started, Chianti Classico, Amarone. But in fact, the culture of all the clones we had in Italy wasn't wild world. So as in Roseto, I mean, the estate had some local grapes, but also many international ones, because if you wanted to drink high-level quality wines, you should drink a Bordeaux wine, Bordeaux blend or something. So when we arrived, we found this situation And I would say that my project was a bit to re-put order in the production. We maintain the old labels. So Collemanora has never changed the labels. We still are going on with the historical label, which is this one. So we have the historical label, and we go on with this one, and we only add some wines. We don't see it well. Anyway, we are still going on with the old labels, and we add some new wines that, because of the story of Giorgio and me, they have a sense in the story of the estate. So Collemanora is also a privileged place because in the whole Monferrato, it's very rare to find an estate which is a whole coop. Normally, the vineyards are one there, one there, one there. Here, the property is one own territory and terroir, how do you say terroirs. And so it is very good for the kind of agriculture that we do. We got the certification of Agricoltura Integrata SQLPI because I choose not to be biological, because we have a sort of natural protection from outside, because it is like an amphitheater, and so we are not contaminated. So I choose to make I was more attracted by the Agricoltura Integrata because, on my point of view, it is the way in which you grow vines much more naturally and much more and not so extreme like the biologic is, that I found a bit too much copper, too much zolfo, and I don't like. So what we did is, I mean, what was my aim was to give to the single grapes their identity, things that was difficult, because when I came, I found a way of doing the wines, you know, with the la mania del blend. So we find the Barbera with the Pinot and the Merlot, and so it wasn't what I liked. And so we decided to work on the single label. So we have the Barbera d'Asti Superiore, which has to be Barbera and not something mixed like the Barbera del Monferrato. Then we were authorized to plant a local grape, which is the Albarossa, which is not so common, and which is a grape which came from a cross of the Nebbiolo di Dronero with the Barbera, and it's an interesting grape. And also on that bottle, we worked a lot because we start saying, well, this grape should have we have to use wood. So for 3-4 years, I tried many ways in the vinification to understand if the Albarossa was a wine who could stay in wood. And the result was very bad, in my opinion. And so we decided by the end not to make to produce, I mean, to make an affinamento in wood, but only in stainless steel. And then we use the system of the oxygenation during the fermentation, and which allows the wine to express himself much better and to be much more natural without this this wood, which was not really helping it. And so
Marina, wait a second. Let me just say a few things, and then you can continue. You can talk about Mila and Mimos and so on. But I think it's important for people to listen to know, when I created MicroMegaWines, it was not to create something about native wine grapes of Italy, because I think that in Italy we're fortunate that we make many wonderful wines from both native and international grapes. Just think of Bolgheri and how famous the Cabernet Sauvignons and Francs and Merlot of Bolgheri are. In Alto Adige, they make very good Pinot Noirs and Sauvignons and Gewürztraminers and so on and so forth. So Italy has over 550 grape varieties growing, and we make wine from all of them. So it's a unique place. And, you know, most people don't realize that in Piedmont, where Marina and Giorgio are, there are now over 30 producers of Riesling wine. So there's lots of international grapes growing, not just in Piedmont, but everywhere. And I think Colle Manora is a very good example of an estate that does wines from both types of grape very, very well. So we mentioned, for example, the Barbera, which is the most planted red grape variety. Actually, it's the most planted grape variety, period, in Piedmont. About 40% of all the vineyards in Piedmont are planted to Barbera. The second most planted grape variety in Piedmont is Moscato Bianco, or white Muscat. Nebbiolo is only the third most planted grape variety. Everybody thinks when it comes to Piedmont, that Nebbiolo, but no, in fact, no. Barbera is really the bloodline of Piedmont wine, and they make two really interesting ones at Colle Manora. The Albarossa variety is another example of a non-native grape variety in that it's a crossing, as Marina was saying. It's a laboratory crossing created by Giovanni Del Masso, one of Italy's most famous grape luminaries, when he crossed Chatus, or Nebbiolo di Dronero, which is unrelated to Nebbiolo, with Barbera, and came up with the Albarossa. Albarossa is a very interesting grape variety, spicy, tobacco notes, very beautiful, that can be drunk fresh. And the bottle that they make, called Rei, we featured it last year in the master classes. It's a really great wine. So if you've never had an Albarossa before, you should try it at MicroMegaWines, because it's a really beautiful wine. A little bit like a Zinfandel, but more elegant in some ways, and really beautiful. But at this estate, they also make wonderful Sauvignon Blanc, Pinot Noir, Viognier, and Marina will tell us all about it.
Yeah, but what is important from my point of view is to give to each bottle that this is the most important work that you do in the vineyards and you do in the vinification and in the cellar, is the personality of the bottle, which has to respect the variety first, and then the personality also of the estates. And we are looking for cleanness, for elegance, and this comes from your experience, or your own palates, because I think that the winemaker, the wine producer, the owners give their own touch to the wines, because they express the personality of who is there. And so it is exactly what we try to do. Mimosa was there. It is the oldest label of Colle Manora, because, as I told you, the previous owner put the international grapes, and it's a Sauvignon Blanc. But this vineyard is now 45 years old, and we use not to replace the vineyard, but we replace the single vine, which is the French method. This means that you have vineyards that maintain the personality and also the, come si dice, radicamento,
the rooting system.
The rooting system in the soil and in the microclimate where they are. And I think that this way to manage the vineyards is very important, to respect the personality and the constants of the wine. For example, the Pinot Noir Palo Alto, which is my baby, because really I did the bottle, because before it was a mix of all the grapes. And I believe in this wine because it's interesting to see how Pinot Noir has his roots now in this estate, because it's so long time that the vineyard has been planted that it has adapted to the microclimate. And certainly we make a harvest very soon. We do it between middle of August and the 25th, depends on the year. But the result is really interesting. And I mean, I am very happy because everybody recognized the quality of this bottle. And it's a Pinot Noir. So even if it's very rare to find Pinot Noir in Monferrato. Unfortunately, we cannot have other grapes because of the disciplinary of the laws. So in Monferrato, we are in Monferrato, and we can only plant with the denomination the Barbera and the Albarossa, even not Rouquet. because Rouquet is a very small area near here, but we cannot plant Rouquet. We have also Barolo, because I hired a little parcel in Monforte, and in order to have the whole line to present to the clients. So we have also, but our enologue is the same, so we do it with him, and it's interesting also because we try to have the same kind of standard in elegance and in clarity, in pureness, by doing these wines. And so it's interesting to find on this estate all these facets that you can have of the expression of a territory which is really vocated, because also this year that was so hot, the harvest has been good, a bit less in production, but still a good quality, because we have this good excursion. We have nights that are fresh, even if you are 35 degrees in the day. We still have very fresh nights, and the vines has sort of protect themselves. I've seen them stop growing, you know, and we have not doing any topping this year because we don't need it to do. And I didn't take away any leaves just to keep them protected, and the result was good. So this let us hope that this big change in the temperature that we have, and also the water, which is not so much, I was very upset to say maybe we have to change the way, maybe we cannot do any more good wines, what will happen, and so on. For the moment, the vines has react very well. So it's an interesting terroir, and it's interesting to come and see that you can find in this part of the Piedmont not so well treated, I would say, because Monferrato is a special place where we are a bit close. I mean, you don't have the expansion as you have in Barolo, that everybody, there is a lot of people and wine lovers that go there. Here, the tourism of the wine is a bit less expanded than in the area of Alba. But I think we have a lot to offer, because it's very beautiful, and the territory is very protected.
Absolutely, no. The Monferrato area is the main city of the Monferrato is probably Alessandria. You know, in the Langhe, the main city is Alba. In the Asti area, it's Asti, Monferrato. And these areas are really sequential. You know, you go west to east, and you come across all of them. The Monferrato is a uniquely wild area. It's very beautiful. It's not full of manicured vineyards. There's lots of forests and woods. And there are many, many different grape varieties growing. Colle Manora grows a bunch of different grape varieties, but in fact, in the Monferrato, there's many, 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 many more. Marina mentioned the Rouquet. There's at least 3 different black berried Malvasia varieties. There's 1 white berried Malvasia variety. There's Grignolino, there's Fresa, there's many, many grape varieties. So the Monferrato is a shame in that it's not an area that is better known and maybe not as talked about. But in fact, it's a wonderful area that offers a lot of very diverse wines. And I love the wines of Monferrato, and I think Colle Manora does a very good job of showcasing the many different possibilities of the Monferrato hillside. So I think, and we forgot that one of the wines they make at Colle Manora is the Rosso Barchetta, which is a Cabernet Merlot, Cabernet Sauvignon Merlot blend.
But the Rosso Barchetta has a story. Is because of the passion that both George and I have for cars.
Yeah.
And also the collection and everything. And you know that we still race, even if we are a bit old now. But anyway, the Rosso Barchetta is dedicated to the car that is in the cellar.
The Ferrari.
Yes, and it's a bottle which is a blend, because it is dedicated also to the Ferrari lovers. And this way we choose especially to do a blend with an international grape, which is Cabernet and Merlot. It's a good wine, interesting wine. well, it's not a Monferrato wine, but it's
No, it's fine. It's fine. I think it's good. It's a wine that speaks to everybody. And I think that if people want to visit the Monferrato area, the wineries at Colle Manora, of course, you always have to call and see. But beautiful collection of race cars, because Giorgio Schoen was a world-class race driver. Rosso Barchetta, the Barchetta is a very famous Ferrari for those who love cars. But also Giorgio Schoen, the last name for anybody who knows anything about fashion, will remind you, of course, of Mila Schoen, one of Italy's greatest all-time fashion designers, like Valentino, like Gianfranco Ferré, and Salvatore Pucci, and many, many others who have made made in Italy what it is over the years. So Colle Manora, not just great wines, but an unbelievable series of collections. It's like a museum in there, literally.
yeah, we have the museum.
Yeah, and you can see the models of the haute couture. So it's a unique place that blends gastronomy with haute couture and fine motors. So I look forward to seeing you. Thank you very much.
You have to come back, and so you see also the improvement we did.
Oh yeah, no, I have to come back. I mean, this is the first time I've been back in Italy now since almost 3 years, believe it or not. It's really funny. I came back home, no heating, no air, no warm water, a disaster.
Oh,
and I have to take care of my mother a little bit, but I am trying to see a bunch of you. I will see 5 or 6 estates from MicroMega before Vinitaly, but then I come back in the summer, and I'll be here end of July, August, September. And I'm definitely coming to Monferrato, so I will let you know.
We can host you anyway. We have, because we have now also the house.
Grazie.
Okay.
Thank you very much, everybody. I don't want to go overboard here, but thank you. Very interesting talk. I think the people who listened probably learned quite a bit. Very interesting wine producers, very interesting wines, very interesting grapes and territories. And that's really what we're trying to do with MicroMega Wines. Thank you very much. And see you all at Vinitaly. Ciao.
Thank you. Ciao.
Ciao.
Thank you.
Ciao. Grazie.
Thank you.
Grazie.
Bye bye.